I think for me, it's something that I've always kind of thought about in terms of my mental health. That's just based on my own, earlier on experiences. So in terms of adverse childhood experiences, even though I wouldn't say I've either experienced anxiety or depression, it's something that I've always done at the back of my mind that I need to access support for this. But also, I'm one of those people, I believe that, you don't need to kind of have a backstory to access mental health and health support. I think everyone, can deal with that support without the additional trauma that others have experienced, or like myself that I've experienced. So when I turn 25, normally I treat myself. So I'll go on holiday or solo or with a friend. And I was like, what can I give to myself, this year? I don't know. Maybe it's like society because you're 25 and everyone's like, you should be doing X, Y, and Z. And I thought, I'm going to gift myself like therapy, only because I know that there's things that I've experienced in the past, but also they are just everyday things. So for example, being alone in the, in the work environment, within school as well, like within work, I went through a challenging time, but also being the only Black woman as well. So I still experience things like racism, and I still experience microaggressions from colleagues. So I thought, it would be a good idea. But not only that, it gave me a better understanding of myself, but not only that, to how to handle certain things. So for me, like therapy was a resource, that I can give to myself and that I can always use even years to come. Initially, when I went into therapy, I was like, I'm going to find a Black woman therapist. I did a lot of shopping, I'm not going to lie. So I think I met about 4, and I didn't really gel with them. And then someone introduced me to the smell therapist, and I was like, okay. And do you know what? He is amazing. So the therapy that I access is also around mindfulness. So it's taught me a lot about how to meditate, how to, the breathing exercises. Even when I'm dealing with something quite difficult in that moment in time, I am able to literally just do like mindfulness. So even at work, before I kind of make a difficult phone call, because unfortunately I deal with a lot of difficult conversations day in, day out, I'm able just to kind of put myself in that mindset where I am able to do that, but also I'm able to switch off after work. But I found that it's really helpful in my relationships with family, friends, but work, and just how I look after myself on a daily basis.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nessa. Rumbi?
I think for me, it came later on in life, I won't lie. I think when I moved, I didn't actually realize, and this is something actually that I had been talking to my therapist about and came to realize through this experience, but like, I didn't realize how much moving, being taken from, my home, like really affected me. And so I think I always felt, I don't know what it was because I was never diagnosed in those at that time in those years, my teenage years. But I always, felt not right, and that spilled into my 20s as well, my early 20s, and I think it wasn't until I experienced a couple of like quite big traumas. Like I had a major loss in my family, and around the same time, someone very close to me was diagnosed with a mental health condition. I will say, because I won't mention names, so they were diagnosed with psychosis. So I had to, they're quite close, so we had to deal with that as well. So I think that's when I started being more conscious of it when I was going through that, because everything was happening at once. So all at the same time. So I think that's when I started to be more conscious and actually thinking, okay, well, how am I actually feeling? Is this normal? And it gradually, from there, I was in my early 20s, so I was about 23. Gradually from there, that's when I started to learn, like bit by bit, about myself and how I relate to myself and others. And learn more as well about like mental health conditions themselves, especially having you know, someone close with me who has a condition. And I think last year I decided, well, I'd accessed it through the NHS before, so I'd had like cognitive behavioral therapy mainly for like depression and like grief therapy as well.
Yes.
But it wasn't the best through the NHS, and they only give you like a certain amount of sessions as well. I think I got 6, and then they let you go. And it just was not, it was short-lived, and it wasn't the best that I had. But this year I decided, last year, sorry, I decided to actually like do it privately. So then I started seeing a therapist. She's absolutely amazing. But I think that's when I don't know, I feel like I'm at the beginning. My journey is just starting, which sounds wild because all of this has happened, but I think like my journey is just starting. And I was telling you guys that, you know, I took a vitamin D test today, and that's another reason why my mental health has not always been great, especially during the winter times. So I'm very conscious of that now, and that is something that I do that I'm doing now, just to make sure that I'm on the right track. Yeah.
I was just going to add what Rumbi said about the lack of vitamin D is something that I also experienced, and I think we spoke about it on the podcast. And I just want to kind of like just raise awareness that it is so important to get your bloods checked. So if you're like feeling constantly tired, in my experience, I will sleep for over 8 hours and I will still be tired. But not only that, but feeling very achy constantly. When I went to my GP and he did the blood test and then came back and he was like, it was significantly low. I think it was like 17, the count. Sorry if it's getting too much, but I think the normal count is like 30 or something like that. And no one understood. So I'd always say to my friends, I'm tired. And everyone was like, why are you always tired? But that can also make you feel quite low. It just does affect your physical health, the emotional health, because you're not getting enough sleep. You're not feeling physically well entirely. But yeah, that's all I was going to add.
In my experience, it's a mixed experience, because the person is actually male, so I think I got to see it from both sides. So I'll start there and then I'll say my own experience. So in terms of like the community and the culture, I don't know how to put it without being
just say it.
Put it anyhow, don't be shy.
Yeah, just say
in terms of like the community, I think they were just awful, to put it like bluntly. They were really awful about it. And there were some, you know, people like reached their own conclusions as to like, you know, what was happening and why. And yeah, and it was just really insensitive as well, like the way that it was received, especially considering that, you know, we were, my whole family was going through a loss as well. So there were definitely a lot of stigmas that you know, that attached to that came out, and people were some people were quite awful about it. In terms of like people closer to me, we were shocked. Sounds weird, but we were really shocked, and we didn't know what to do. We were stunned. So it was about, you know, if you're talking about barriers, I feel like it was quite the opposite actually when it came to the closer circle, because some of them actually work as mental health nurses. So we were able to get help through them. So I think, but if it wasn't for that, I don't know if we would have been able to, you know, say this is what's happening or whatever. But we were basically talked through step by step how to handle this, because a lot of people we knew that were close to us were mental health nurses. In terms of myself and my own barriers, I think, because I said I first went through the NHS, didn't I? And first of all, it was a really long waiting time. So I was on that list for a long time. So that's barrier number one. And then barrier number two, I think I didn't quite get what I needed. So I think because maybe the resources just aren't enough, but I was just given, I got CBT, but it wasn't like quite, I don't think it was what I needed, basically. I just got given someone who was available, and you don't get to choose what background they're from, if they relate well with you and your experience. So that was another thing as well, why I thought, you know, going through that initial, dose of therapy wasn't so amazing, just because it was short. I only got 6 sessions and waited ages for it. And I didn't really get someone who could actually relate to my experience or my cultural background. So those were the barriers that I faced. And then after that, after having gone through that, I thought, okay, well, let me get it. I would just get it privately. And then, you know, you look up those prices and you're and you're like, this is so expensive. Because I think that they start at like £40 an hour or something, and they can go to like 150 an hour. So it's quite expensive. And I am privileged to have that now, and I'm thankful. But at the time, I was a lot younger. I wasn't working full time like I am now. So I just didn't have that money. So that was really difficult as well, like feeling like, oh, I really want to access this, but this thing is stopping me.
Like Rumbi, in terms of like the community. So I, growing up in Zimbabwe and also here, I've seen people, people that are family go through, poor mental health, and the reaction is always quite awful. I mean, in most cases, people kind of say, oh, they're doing drugs and that is why they're experiencing poor mental health, or, it's witchcraft, all of this. So it doesn't really make it a positive experience, unfortunately, when you do want to access like therapy and you want to access the support. What I find is, in terms of myself, I mean, I've always kind of known about mental health because of the job that I'm in, but I find that I'm quite selective about who I tell that I go to therapy, because I know that the minute I mention that I'm accessing therapy, it's going to start like, oh, why, you've got a good you've got a good job and you've got a roof over your head, why do you need mental health support? And people always think, oh, are you depressed, or do you have anxiety, what is going on, why do you need it? There's always a question around it. So that's what my experience is, which has made me kind of really to challenge people around me, even though sometimes I'm just selective about who I talk to about mental health, about things that I've experienced, only because I know that the reaction is not always going to be welcoming or a safe space for myself. More than anything, I would find myself quite frustrated quite a lot. But in terms of the barriers, like Rumbi, so the cost, this is why I waited until I was 25, because I would go on the website and you say £50 an hour. I was like, what? So it's very, very expensive. And I knew about the waiting list with the NHS, and I just thought, you know what, I'm not even going to bother. I mean, if you can, obviously go for it, do it. But I would always say it's very important for people to have, you know, a supportive therapist who understands your background, who understands certain dynamics, for example, who understand the losses that you go through when you migrate, you know, from either Zimbabwe or any other, you know, nation, but also, and then how that affects your identity and how you handle things, but also even the role within the family, it changes, because I find that I am responsible for quite a lot of things, which can be overwhelming. And for some people, it's quite surprising, but I know that it's not uncommon for a lot of migrant children, unfortunately. And that's just my experience. And hopefully, you know, these conversations will help to just encourage others to access support.
You mentioned, you know, something as well about, you know, older people in the community and how they receive that. And I think that can be a barrier. If it wasn't for the fact that I have very supportive sisters, absolutely amazing, I don't know if I would have been, you know, I don't know if I would be in the same position, because to try to talk about older people in our community, about you know, parents, aunties, uncles, about seeking therapy, about your mental health, I just feel like they don't understand it. Ironically, especially since a lot of them might benefit from actually, you know, going and talking to someone, but they just don't understand it. And some people don't think that it's real. Some people just don't think it's real. And like Nessa was saying, some people like say, you know, you have this and you have that and you have that, so why are you feeling this way? What's your problem? Some people are worse off in the world or whatever. So I think it wasn't for me, luckily, because I had supportive sisters who were able to get me to the right place. But I think if they weren't there, that would have definitely been a barrier for me. The fact that I wouldn't have had someone to go to and actually talk to, and they would believe me and say, oh yeah, you know, that's validate my feelings and say that's a real experience and you could benefit from getting help.
I think it can be quite a battle, I'm not going to lie, to be honest. And also it can be quite challenging, only because for myself anyway, I'm quite mindful that, you know, some of the people in our family have gone through living through colonization, through, you know, genocide, and then through obviously the brutality that is going on right now in Zimbabwe and all of that. But not only that, having to leave your family members behind, and some of them have had to live in exile, but also those loss of connections, and also the impact. I mean, if I think about one of my grandmothers that lives here, she came here in the 80s. So you can only imagine what her experiences would have been like as a Black woman having just arrived here. So I tend to be quite careful how I go into those conversations. So I find that a lot of our elders, they have these conversations that I find quite traumatic sometimes. Like they just go into them just like that. They will talk about, you know, the genocide and the things they witnessed in a almost manner that is blasé, I want to say, as if it's just normal. And I mean, I engage and I listen and I ask, have you ever thought about accessing support and talking? It might help. It might help you to feel better. It might help you to just understand what you've been through. I think it's quite challenging, and I think for me it's about being careful when to have that conversation with them. So I find that I tend to just bring it up here and there, or I make examples of, you know, things that I've done, or if I hear about something and I mention it just in passing, just because I know that for them it can be quite challenging. But one thing that I always do is just to reassure them that actually there is nothing wrong with just talking to someone. It doesn't have to be anyone that you know. It's very helpful. So I think for me it's just giving that information, and hopefully, you know, if it helps and if they want to access it, I can pinpoint them in the right direction. And that's just how I kind of do it, really.
I think like Nessa, I find it really difficult. I think to start with, I just kind of, and this was, I guess, this was when I was a lot younger, so I didn't know, I knew less back then, but I just kind of like, you know, went into it head first and like wanting to have that conversation. But then I think as I got to learn more about myself and my own experience, I realized that you just have to be mindful that not everyone is in the same, you know, not everyone is in the same part of their journey of healing as you are, if that makes sense. So like we're all at different stages, and the stage that I was at that time, I was prepared to talk about those things. But some people are right at the beginning, and you know, they haven't even come to terms, they haven't even come to realize what really happened to them. You know, like Nessa was saying, some people talk about these really like awful events in such a blasé, like matter-of-fact way. So I don't know, I feel like some people haven't even realized what's happened to them. They haven't even realized that they've been through traumatic experiences, and that happens. And I think it's just about being mindful that the person that you're talking to is at maybe at a different stage to you in their journey of healing. So not being patient with them as well. Like if you're talking to them, if they don't want to talk, I think, you know, you can't force people. So like that's one thing. And I think, yeah, I think that's how I approach it now, just with a lot of patience and just being mindful of what these elders went through. And especially when it comes to like my dad or my uncles, I just think as well, because when they grew up, society was worse to them as men. And it demanded a lot from them, and obviously squashed that side of them where they could talk about their feelings or talk about, you know, things that affect them emotionally. So I think also taking that into consideration when you approach these conversations really help. So yeah, I've not quite figured out how to approach it yet, but I'm learning.
So I was just going to add on to what you said, really, in terms of, you know, the things that they've been through, and they might not want to talk about it. And one thing that I have learned, obviously, through like therapy is, obviously there's that kind of secondary trauma as well, you know, if they're constantly sharing those things with you, having boundaries, but also, even if you're not offering support in terms of like, well, you must do this, have you thought about that? Even if it's just listening. So I feel as though for them, and I think everyone may be the same here, you find that when our elders get together, all they talk about is politics or some reason. Or if it's not football, it's politics. It's all about the development of Africa and so forth. And I find that maybe for them, that is a space for them to heal in a way, to just to kind of talk about the things they've been through, their, you know, their parents as well. And for me, I think now I tend to just listen, and just actively listening actually is what I tend to do. And I think for them that means so much. And I know that some of them may never access that counseling support, and that's fine, but have your boundaries, because secondary trauma is real.
I think it was Rumbi who mentioned the fact that when she was at the therapist, one of the benefits or takeaways was that they said back, they were listening, which is the key thing you were saying just now, Nessa. You should just listen. Don't go there going, I know what's going on. You know, I'm with it. I've read a couple books. I've seen a couple podcasts. These guys, they just don't know. I'm here to enlighten. listen, because when the therapist listened and the therapist said, yeah, no, that sounds like seeking help for that is a reasonable thing to do. You go, oh, you're not saying, oh, what about these people who are going through a tougher time? You're not saying, oh, I'm making a big deal out of it. I've got all this stuff. You're saying it's okay for me to get help, and I'm not necessarily broken, and I'm just okay. I just need to process this in a different way or look at it differently, and this is the way I do that. Oh, great. You can do that for some of the people in the older generation, because I suppose they haven't had anyone to listen to them all this time. Some of the things they can take action on is things like voting. Okay, maybe I couldn't do anything, but if I can change the system with a vote, or because we fought for independence, my vote means so much to me, let me at least do this, because some time ago they wouldn't let me vote. They didn't see me as worthy of that. And when we then go, they've not had anyone to sincerely listen to them and just try and help them process. Sometimes you might think therapy, all you're paying for is someone to listen to you talk.
I feel like literally we went back and forth in terms of what we're going to call like the podcast. So I was asking my friends, we had like about 10 names, and then we settled on Brunch and Bantu Knots. So if you think about, the discussions that me and Rumbi have, and obviously previously our other co-host Mona as well, it's more like a girls' chat over brunch, things that you will chat to with your friends and so forth. But also for me, the Bantu Knots, I could be wrong, so may have to correct me. Bantu Knots is almost like a play on obviously the hairstyle like Bantu Knots, but also for me, us being Southern African as well, Abantu, so like brunch and people kind of thing. I felt like it came together nicely, and I feel like it goes well with the things that we talk about, but also our like vision for the podcast. But yeah, let Rumbi kind of.
You've said it. That's it. So it is, just like because like you guys said, we have serious chats. Sometimes we just start messing about on our podcast and just having fun chats as well, catching up with the TL. But yeah, so it is that, just like talking to your girlfriends kind of thing. And like Nessa said, we are Southern African, and Bantu, if you say in this accent. And yeah, then the hairstyle, because we all had natural hair, so that we played on that hairstyle thing, but also the coming together of Abantu. It's like like an Ubuntu. Is that
Yeah.
the
yeah Ubuntu,
yeah
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's it. I hope it makes sense.
Hey, we get it. Abantu Bantu. Mm-hmm. We're in the right room.
I really love the play on words, and how much substance it has, because as much as people, we love food, and that coming together brings us together to have these conversations. And it also makes me think and ask both of you, what was your why to have, as much as you're having these conversations, what was your why to bring it to the forefront of the platform?
I think like Rumbi, I've always wanted to do a podcast, always, and I kind of felt a bit shy, like doing by myself. So I was like, oh, I need someone. And when obviously Rumbi kind of tweeted like, oh, she wants to do a podcast, I was like, girl, let's do it. But for me, the reason why is because I felt as though, whilst there's a lot of podcasts out there, and I love them, I felt like it was crucial for us, especially living in the Northwest. So you find that a lot of the podcasts that I listen to anyway, personally, they're based like in London and so forth. And I feel like our experiences slightly differ, but also I felt like our experiences as Black British Zimbabwean women and the age that we are, the things that we experience, I felt like someone had to hear it out there. But also I feel like some of the things, for example, we talk about like colorism. I know that those are things that a lot of people experience. I mean, even when I talk to my younger cousins back home, they experience it as well. And I think just being that voice that someone can like listen to and feel like, you know what, they see me, they hear me, I've been through this, and they can relate. And there's so much in just being able to relate to others and people sharing their stories. And I think it's just so important.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, it's like trying to put out a voice that we wanted to hear when we were growing up. That's it, really.
You've done it. I love that. Dreams do come true. I mean, because when I first read your sort of title, I just had this vision of, or like say, a brunch being served, and I know how long braids take. I always say, you know, don't be fooled. I used to have, you know, I had a good head of hair one time, but so I know how long, you know, doing the cornrows, but especially the thin braids or plaits, you know, take. So I had that vision of you having brunch and you're all out there talking. And why that resonated or hit me as such a strong image is pretty universally, shall we say, the barber shop for men is seen as one of the places where it's open therapy. Like you go there, you let it out, you know, you vent, you get advice as well. It's one of the unique places as well where multiple generations of men will congregate and just be able to listen to each other and kind of see each other and see what men are really about, you know, because you hear everything. Sometimes maybe a bit too much. And I would have assumed it's similar with ladies with the hairdressing, or because I know sometimes it's, you know, it's done at home and all that stuff. So.
Oh yeah, oh, it's similar.
Yeah, good. And it's, you know, it's very intimate. And when people are being intimate with you, and I say intimate, it's like one of the few professions where you're actually in contact with people, you know, besides masseuse. And when that's happening, you do just tend to open up a lot more. But that's anyway, I'm glad. It's a beautiful name. It sticks. I love it. Keep with it. I can see us doing a brunch series, you know, like
I see it.
Yeah, me too.
It's wonderful. So your key drive there is to provide the conversations that you would have loved to have heard. What are some of your, I don't want to say goals with it, but like if you were to say have a, what's it called, an obscene goal, like the ridiculous goal for your platform, what would it be? Like, what would you want to do?
I think one of our goals is to do shows, like live shows. I would absolutely love to do that. We did one, we were on a panel last summer, and we absolutely loved it. So that's where the photo is from. With the mic. But yeah, I think for me, more live shows and actually just get to connect with people in person. I did say I am an introvert, but I actually love connecting with people. It's just it gets tiring, but I love it. So I would love to just like, you know, meet people in person, hear their stories as well, and just yeah, through live shows and things like that.
Nessa, what's your take? Is it the same vision or?
Yeah, the same really. And I think for us it's just kind of just connecting with more and more people. So just to share our own experiences, like Rumbi said, when we were on that panel in Birmingham, and it was amazing. And we're just among a lot of just like powerful Black women that are doing amazing things out there. And I felt as though, you know, the audience were very much receptive. And I love that. And I feel like we should do more of that as a community. So that's what I hope for. And this is what I hope the podcast does already. Just, you know, when people tune in and they're listening, they feel empowered, but also they're learning something from it as well. So because for me, I am all about like learning, and yeah, that's what I hope for.
I think I've learned so much from like Mr. Manager was on it, and that was such an amazing episode because like he did most of the talking and I was just like taking it all in, and he just had so much like good advice like when it comes to like money and finances. I think that whole episode was one of my favorites because yeah, I needed to hear some of the things that he was saying, a lot of the things that he was saying. And I also really loved the episode where we had Hethla on, and she just like gave me some information that I didn't know I needed. I think it was you guys, Nessa and Hethla, they both have some experience in that area. It was a DV, a domestic violence episode, but like the resources that these two gave were just amazing. Like, you know, I don't know if I'll, hopefully I don't need to use them for the future, but just knowing that they're there and like putting them out there, I thought that was really, really good. I can't pick one particular thing, but I think those off the top of my head, yeah, those two.
I will accept that gladly. And you, Nessa?
Oh wow. Same like Rumbi. Obviously, I really enjoyed the podcast with Mr. Manager, aka Timmy. He is amazing. If you guys don't know about him, please do go and follow him, because I feel as though as a Black community, and I could be wrong because I keep saying Black community, but I find that a lot of people don't speak openly about finances. Even myself, in my own journey, you know, I was like, guys, tell me about saving. I want to buy a house. And it was just crickets. I was like, what's going on? I need this advice like right now. So I think his platform was just amazing in terms of what he shared. But so yeah, that was one of like my most favorite. I can't really say one thing that was profound, but I would say is pay yourself first. So that is something that I keep in mind. So now when I get paid, I'm like, Nessa, you need to pay yourself first, girl. But also, we didn't have a guest on this one, but one of them I enjoyed the most was with Chinaswe, just learning more about her experiences as a lesbian woman living in South Africa and being Zimbabwean as well. That was very, eye-opening for me. And I can't really say I can't remember, to be honest. Like, it was one thing that she mentioned in particular, but I just loved it. I loved her energy as well. But, all of our guests have been amazing. I would say one of the most profound episodes was our very own, which is titled She Comes First. Just go and check it out. It was eye-opening, I should say.
The introduction said it all. You won't be disappointed. Make sure you keep following Nessa and Rumbi, and make sure you keep up to date with what they're doing, because it'll only make you better. And what's wrong with becoming better?